My name is Annie Calkins, and I'm just going to speak briefly about how we got started in this work, and then pass it on to my colleagues who will each introduce themselves as we go. And I want to start by quoting the words of some of the elementary and middle school students who've been involved in the program at Harborview and at Zuntakahini Middle School here in Juneau for some of them all of their elementary and middle school lives. And the question was posed to them, why I want to learn Tlingit language and culture. And here's some of what some of them had to say. Because I want to talk to my grandma in Tlingit. I want to keep in touch with my culture so I can teach others. I want to learn Tlingit language and culture because when I take trips down south, I would like to give this information to other people. Because before I moved up here from Texas, I didn't even know about Tlingit culture. I like Tlingit songs and learning more. It's good learning new languages. It's my culture. I love learning it. It is beautiful. I want to learn Tlingit because I want to learn my language. I get to learn new songs, and I get to learn how to say things in class, like the weather and things like dogs and cats. I also get to teach my siblings. It helps us learn a whole new language. Learning our Tlingit language will change our future. That's the real reason for doing this. So the Juneau School District for the last 9 years has been involved with an Alaska Native Education grant funded by the U.S. Department of Education in collaboration with Sealaska Heritage Institute. And throughout those 9 years, there's always been the vision and the desire and the goal to teach language. And it took 6 or 7 years to get enough organizational support within the school district to find resources who could consistently teach the language and to really make it a priority with all of the families and the staffs in the buildings that were involved in this federal grant. So the last time around, 3 years ago, when we were putting the grant proposal together, we had this heart-to-heart conversation about, are we actually really going to teach the language now? So the answer to that question was yes, let's do it. Let's teach it consistently. Let's teach it every day. Let's teach it in an organized fashion using a scope and sequence that we will develop. It was probably 7 years ago at a big meeting that we had with Sealaska, the university, Tlingit Haida, Gold Belt, and the school district, where Dick Dowenhauer stood up and he said over and over and over, we absolutely need to have some kind of a roadmap. We need to have some kind of scope and sequence, because otherwise how do we know where we're going and how do we know what our expectation is going to be at the end, whatever the end is? Can we come up with some agreement that at the end of 5th grade we want students to be what? Do we want them to be fluent? Do we want them to know this much, that much? We don't know. We've never had that difficult dialogue about what our goals and our expectations were for language. So with that encouragement and challenge constantly, and this heart-to-heart conversation we had as we were submitting the grant about, do we really want to do it this time? We said yes. We want to map out a written scope and sequence. We want to teach with that written scope and sequence. And then we want to assess what students are learning. And so that then once we field test it and once we try it, we can say that at the end of a first year of learning the language, you might expect that children would know this much or this much. And we're talking about listening and speaking primarily. And then eventually we'll get into literacy. So that's what we have been working on for the last 2.5 years in the Juneau School District. Pretty consistently every Tuesday, there's a scope and sequence meeting with this team of individuals really mapping it out. And then Jessica Chester's in the back of the choir row here, being the primary instructor of the language. So that's the sort of context, that's the backdrop. You'll hear about some great successes and some ongoing challenges. The district just submitted another grant to the federal government that will continue some of this work. And you'll hear about how we can share this work with you in other communities and schools across the region, because it's been our goal really to put it in writing, to record it on DVDs so that others can build off of this work, and then you can all share back with us. So now I would like to invite Linda Belarde from the Alaska Heritage Institute and Nancy Douglas from the Juneau School District to talk about the process and how we organized this work. And would also like to encourage all of you, I know there's a sign-up sheet somewhere, it's a yellow piece of paper, so that please sign in and give us your email so that we can continue to give you updates as we work through the end of this school year. So thank you very much. Linda and Nancy.
Satuk yuchat tu asauk. Linda Belarde yuchat tu asauk. Daktain tan ayachat. Filipino yedi ayachat. Si Alaska Heritage Institute yejichane. Gunath chish.
Shrei yuchat tu asauk chak nachat sati. Yanyedi ayachat. Shitka kwan ayachat. And Linda and I have, I think, been not the leading force, but kind of kept reading the grant and saying, okay, this is what we're supposed to do and how are we supposed to get this started. So with the guidance of Alice here, she kind of came to the meetings and got us directed. We weren't quite sure what to do. We knew we tried teaching Tlingit in many different ways, and I grew up in Sitka and I went through the Sitka Native Education program, so was very familiar with how I was taught Tlingit and knew that from working with the elders. The classroom in Juneau has been in existence for 9 years now, the Tlingit Culture, Language, and Literacy program. And we struggled, and the one thing we kept saying is we need a full-time language teacher. And with that language teacher, we need that teacher to have a scope and sequence so that we had some plan. When these kids came into kindergarten, we had a plan to say, okay, this is what we need to teach them. And the one thing I kept reflecting on, I started working in the Juneau School District in 1986. And I was fortunate to have gotten a job at the Indian Studies program. And prior to that, in the early 70s, a group of elders got together, none of whom are with us anymore, but they were in the leading edge because they got together with the Indian Studies staff and developed a scope and sequence. And all those years since I've been working for the Juneau School District, always reflect back on that scope and sequence that the elders put together. And with that, we started figuring out this language scope and sequence, and I'll let Linda talk a little bit about how we got started.
Nancy said that when we first got started, we were what we were doing was floundering. And we met, and there was a much larger group of people who have since fallen by the wayside because they just didn't have the time, and it wasn't their primary focus to stick to it long enough till we found a focus. So this, we started meeting over at the school district office, and it was a large table and people and trying to understand what it was that we were trying to do, and what is this scope and sequence anyway, what are we talking about? And then, so then we decided, okay, there's things that we teach, and then there's the order that we teach them. So the things that we teach is the scope, and the sequence is the order. Because what we have seen is wonderful, wonderful teaching going on all over Southeast Alaska. A great unit on berry picking here, a cute one on clothing over here, another one on who am I over here. and really good, but not easily replicable in other places because it was spotty, you know, like little spotlights everywhere. Each of your tables is a spotlight of a wonderful unit. But then how does a new teacher come in then and say, how do I string these together? And most importantly then, how do I tell that the kids learned all of these little highlights that I've been teaching? So as we started, we were still floundering. That whole first year we were floundering. And we ended up having a table over here of linguists. That was Alice, Dick, and Carrie. And a table over here of content that was mostly Nancy, Nora, and me. And a few other people would join us. And then I was working with the content, and so we'd say, well, what else do we teach? And so we would start listing words. And then Nora was the one who said, didn't I already write these down somewhere? And at first I know I was really defensive. But when I thought about it, I thought, yeah, a lot of this is already written down someplace. We don't have to reinvent it. Let's look for it. But our beginning work, you will see in the PowerPoint that Jessica has put together, because we were so creative. We had big circles, and in those circles was our content, and we webbed those circles with other circles. And then we spent hours and hours and hours trying to put all the words into that circle because they wouldn't fit, because we started coming up with too many words. And so we spend a lot of time floundering. So that's just the way it is. You know, it's not good or bad. That's just the way it is.
And when we started doing our circles, the one thing you need to know is we had talked to our admin assistant, and the big vision was, as we knew there was all this curriculum out there, and we knew we kind of had an idea, and our vision was to go with the technology. And within our circles, our whole vision was, if you clicked on berries, you could click on berries and bloop, would pop up the unit on berries and words that related and sentences that related to berries. But then that became really too much for us because we're non-techies. And then we changed our format, which you'll see, and Jess is going to show you that in the PowerPoint also.
Alice Taff yuchat duasak, Wudashi Tla yuchat duasak, German ayachat, Welsh Setian ach ish. I'm very happy to see all of you here today. It seems like this would be kind of a dry subject, but we'll try to make it juicy because there's a lot of juice in there. But we're writing a paper document. So the first thing I want to say is that the United Nations says it is a civil right for people to learn their heritage language. So bear that in mind whenever anybody questions it. It's the law. It's my civil right. Now, I should make the caveat that the United States is one of 3 countries in the planet that didn't sign the UNESCO declaration. However, you don't have to tell people that. I want to say about this kind of work, developing a paper, scope and sequence, that I was recently at a presentation by an Australian who said that in New South Wales, Australia, they have just completed a scope and sequence, a syllabus, they call it, for Aboriginal languages. She said when we published that syllabus, 50 new language programs came online. I also would like to say from that same presentation, a man got up and from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and said that children, first language learners, are exposed to 1 million sentences per year or more. Okay, so if 1 million, that's 2,700 sentences a day in the language that they're learning, their first language or the language that they're exposed to naturally. He also said that children need 400 exposures to irregular verbs. Well, maybe we don't need that much. So I'm going to show you what the scope and sequence looks like now, and I'm going to ask if some people would pass out these little slips of paper that have the web address where you can download this draft. It's a draft, it's not final. The draftiest thing about it is the Tlingit needs proofreading. Every page says it's a draft. So what it is a collection of words and sentences in 5 levels. They're not grade levels, they're not age levels. They are beginner, advanced beginner, up to master speaker. So it can be any age, can be a beginner. Hopefully in the scope, everything that could be included, we will include all of the grammatical forms that we know about. So the simplest ones or the most often used ones will be in level 1. The most infrequent, most complex, most sophisticated would be in level 5. But throughout the whole levels 1 through 5, there's a kind of a map for people to follow so that things don't get left out. There aren't any gaps. This is a kind of impossible dream, wouldn't you say? But that's our dream. I'll walk you through the table of contents. And this is what's available to you now is levels 1 and 2. This is not a set of lesson plans. It doesn't have activities. There's just some suggestions for things, but we do have one possible scenario. You can get activities and form your lesson plan elsewhere and form your lessons plans from here. So in the table of contents, you see beginning speaker skills, level 1, and then we have topics, the grammar that's expected at level 1, teaching methods, teaching and learning resources. So I'm going to go to those spots right now.
One of the format I just noticed on my list here that we finally decided on is the NELI benchmarks, and NELI stands for Northwest Indian Languages Institute, and there's also a SILNA that's down in the Southwest, and so these benchmarks came up and gave us proficiency levels. And this question comes up every time we start talking about our levels, and we say level 1, and people always say, oh, you mean first grade? And we say level 5, they'll be fluent. By 5th grade, they'll be fluent? No, the levels are proficiency in the language. And so Alice mentioned that it could be, if you begin your Tlingit education in mid-school, then you would start at level 1 in mid-school. At the same time, your little brother or sister would be at level 1 in kindergarten. So the hope is that many of the teachers will use these levels so that there would be some consistency, so that somebody who has assessed at level 1 in Sitka would come into Juneau and we'd say, sure enough, they are at level 1. Level 3 in Hoona schools, and then they transfer into Juneau and are assessed here, and they say, yes, they are at level 3 in Tlingit language learning. So and it'll be just like any other standardized test, you know. We think that it is uniform across, but it isn't really. But it would give us guidelines. And it's not meant for testing so much as, here's the guideline, this is the way. This is the way that, this is the map for us to follow as language teachers throughout Southeast Alaska, throughout Canada. And of course, we're not mandating it. We're offering this as a resource. And as Alice said, it's a draft, and it's so drafty you can see right through it. But it's a start, and it has taken time. And you know, I don't want to whine about technology, but every time we transfer materials from one person's program to another person's program, the underlines might fall out. And so then here we are, gee, these aren't right, or are they? And so it is time consuming. And then we have this kind, oh, we're up.
I'm up.
Never mind.
Gunas Tish, the Tuk. So we have goals for each level. The goal for getting through level 1 is to be like a baby, to have learned to produce 100 words in the right context, not sounding right. But in natural language learning all over the world, it seems to be that kids have this one-word stage. When they get 100 words, then something clicks in the brain, and they begin to be able to put 2 words together with child grammar, not adult grammar. But Katrina was up here this morning talking about she knows what she means, and she knows she's doing baby talk, but her mentors are giving her the luxury of being the 3-year-old, the 2-year-old who is putting 2 words together while she develops her ability and her confidence to get to the adult level. So level 1 is, 100 words or fossilized phrases. Level 2 is you're putting words together. They're not great, but you're putting words together. Part of this is we want to assess before we teach what we're going to teach. Do the kids know it yet? And then we teach, and then afterwards we go through it again and see if they learned it. We're not giving them a grade necessarily, and maybe we're a 40-year-old learner. We want to see our progress. This is looking at a list of what we've learned will give us an opportunity to see what progress we've made. So I'll just show you kind of how you can do this. Pardon me. If the person has this electronic copy and they say, for instance, we're using numbers, I'm going to teach this set of words here, this words and phrases. I'll copy that bit. I'll make a new document. I'll paste it in. I'll put my kids' names in here. I'll check off whether they know it when they started. And I'll check off whether they know it when they finished. So I can go in here to the different topics. Level 1 has about 4 or 5 topics: animals, plants, stuff that you would say in the classroom. Level 2 has about 10 different topics, but it includes animals, plants, stuff you would say in the classroom, more words at a higher level of complexity. Adding, say, transportation and food. The list of topics is taken from the Neely guidance, the Northwest Indian Languages Institute, saying if you learn words and phrases, sentences in all these topics, it should cover everything that's covered in your culture. But we're adding things for Tlingit and changing it to make sure that Tlingit culture is covered. So it's not a canned program. It respects the teachers by giving them a place where they can find a whole lot of the language. This levels 1 and 2 is 52 pages. And the higher levels should have more examples, more words and phrases, sentences in there. So it will be a large document. It respects the teachers in the sense that they know their kids, they know what their situation is, they know how to teach, and they can take these language pieces and put them into their situation. So as Annie said, it focuses on understanding and speaking and culture, and does not focus on reading and writing.
A lot of the vocabulary, especially in levels 1 and 2, are from the Tlingit thematic units that Sealaska and Juneau School District developed, and we completed a few years ago. And that work, mostly of it was headed up by Yarovara, and I worked with her, and we worked with fluent speakers, Johnny Marks, June Pegues, and Helen Sarabia. So a lot of that material, you know, we didn't sit there and make up words, so we are gathering the resources and putting them in there. And there's a lot of vocabulary that came from those units.
And another source that we're putting in now is Carrie Edwards' work with her team for words and phrases that she's collecting at the request of teachers throughout the region, and her verbs that she was showing this morning, and her dictionary. So we'll make reference to those, and we'll also put items into the scope and sequence.
And one of the advantages to this is, somebody asked me, well, is that all you guys are doing, is making a list of words? And it is a list of words, but that's not all we're doing. And any of you teachers who have lists of words and can't find them and wonder, what did I file it under? Where is it? You're going to appreciate having it all in one place.
I hate microphones. Is that good? Sego yuchat do a sock. Jessica Chester yuchat do a sock. Yechna ayachat. Lukna khadi ayachat. Ach ish has nawejan. Ach ish has shangu kadi. Ach shishku has shluka khadi. Ach si away. Du ish has wushkitan akwandach gunilchish akwan aniaya. Gunilchish achunki has. We work together every Tuesday, like they said, and it is frustrating to go from trying to list the words and to put them into these little boxes of this kid's gonna know this, check, this kid doesn't know this, minus, and it's hard to do that. And so when I come into the meeting, I bring in the culture part, I bring in the lessons, and what I have today is lessons of the curriculum that I've taught this year, and it's taken from the scope, and it's a list, but it also describes the methods used. A lot of time with finding the lessons or creating the lessons is getting the pictures, and so there's a lot of pictures on there for each of the topics that I've taught this year, so hopefully it will be helpful to you. My Tlingit name is Sikut. I grew up in Juneau. I went to the Juneau School District for all 12 years. And I'm proud to say there's more culture now in just the Harborview and Gastineau elementary schools than what I experienced my whole life growing up in Juneau. And it's amazing, and it's the work from these ladies up here and from the teachers at Harborview and Miss Kitty and my brother, Kunakchish. I stand here talking about assessments, and I have the exclamation mark because they're fun. Let's talk about why. Why do we want an assessment, and why do we need the scope and sequence? And it's to teach our language in an academic setting. It's hard. We want to teach reading, writing, we want to teach math and literature and English, and we want our kids to achieve on their test scores. And so we believe that with teaching the language in this academic setting, we will encourage their brains just to grow and to the neurons to just move faster and they'll just be smarter. It's our hope. We also want to measure the language acquisition and how it's growing. Like, it's accountability of our language programs. If you've taken 2 years of Tlingit language, what does that mean? What do you know? I mean, we hope you know your introduction. We hope you know yesh and chalk, but what else? What do you know? What should you know? The lesson topics that I've covered just this year is the who am I, and a lot of that's that unit from Sealaska Heritage. It's your name, Wasai Duasak. It's your clan, your moiety, your father's people. Greetings. Every day we start with a simple greeting, Wasaiati. How are you? And the kids respond and they shake hands. They use their shinachjin and they sit in a circle and they say, hey, Wasaiati, and they pass it around. And it's creating that communication in a way for them to be comfortable with speaking Tlingit. We talk about the weather every day. There's weather journals on the CDs that if you want one, we'll hand it out. There's the curriculum in there. It's a weather daily log. And so with the 3rd through 5th graders, 2nd through 5th graders, I have them write the day. So Kake yagi, right? Kuchli goose are usually Chiesu siudak usitan, right? It's still raining, and then they draw a little picture of it, and so they have a weather daily log, and so we make the weather applicable to their everyday. And so a lot of what I do is taking this list from the scope and sequence and just putting it in and making it as a conversation and making it part of their lives. We do numbers, counting, birthdays. That's a big one. You can always get kids to count how old they are. Classroom, we always start with just the classroom objects. What is right around them? And Miss Kitty's classroom, her kindergarten, 1st grade classroom is perfect. We have our language lesson 30 minutes every day, and they sit in a circle, and surrounding all of them is all the objects, and they all know every single object in that little circle area in Tlingit. And it's just amazing, just sitting down and talking to them. And when I first started teaching within this program last year, I liked to write, and I was making the kids do worksheets. And let's teach these kindergartners how to make a high tone. Like, it was really silly. And it was the way that I had learned was writing, and so I was trying to push that on them. And then it was Alice who said, just talk to them, let them talk and let them feel it and let them know that they can speak. And ever since then, my lessons have improved. Thank you. We do body parts this year. We've done animals and colors, and a lot of the materials that I use are from Sealaska Heritage, and Linda is a really good contact. If I ever need anything, I can call her up, and she'll find the copy and she'll print it and she'll laminate it. It's awesome. Colors are real important, and we play games with all of these lessons. We use different methods. And the one method when I first started teaching, Roy Mitchell was really pushing TPR, total physical response. And that's where you're telling the kids, Ishatishi, Ishutishi. You know, you're having them respond physically to the Tlingit language. And so they're hearing the language and they're hearing the sounds. A lot of times now, we do the sign language, and the kids are actually teaching me the sign language that they learned from their counselors. And so we don't just say hoots, we go hoots. And so it's using their minds in so many different ways for them to acquire the language. We have ASLA, which Stephen Gray Morning came up with the Juneau School District. And Sealaska has implemented it with their basketball curriculum, and so you have the folders, yadagutsku, shotgutsku, and you do that, different types of methods using pictures. A lot of the songs are just children lullabies, and if you make it into a song, the kids are going to remember it. I'm trying to think of a good example. Just talking about the weather and we seen Miss Kitty's class sings Wasakuati, and they just sing it over and over until the kid walks to the window and looks out the window and turns around and then says the weather. And everyone knows what Wasakuati means by the end of the first week because you're singing it and it's that repetition. A different method, I call it circle communication, and that's just putting the kids in a circle, no books, nothing to distract them, and just talking with them and giving them the chance to use the language. Jim McDermott from SHI, he was able to make a really awesome book with work from elders, and it's new methods. I haven't been able to implement them yet because I'm still learning them, but it's amazing the different materials and methods that are out there, and it's our hope with this scope and sequence, not only just to list the words, but to have a resource for where you can see these methods at, or where you can find them and get more research from them.
Jim will be talking about that tomorrow morning at 8:30, in case anybody doesn't have anything to do at 8:30 on Saturday morning.
So with this, with assessing, you really need to know how long are you exposing the kids to the language and what are you assessing them on. And you need to have a lot of exposure if you want to be able to assess. And at Harborview Elementary, the kids get 30 minutes 5 times a week. And those are the 3 original Harborview immersion classrooms. They're taught by Miss Kitty as the K1 teacher, Miss Elizabeth James is the 2-3 teacher, and Miss Christina Dick is the 4-5 teacher. And they're amazing kids. And it's just amazing how awesome and how much Miss Kitty's class is just taking the language. Those younger kids, that their brain is just that sponge and they're absorbing it. And I just wish I could just take that one classroom and then go with them for the rest of their education and stay with them and learn with them. And they'll know more than me. By high school, they would be teaching me language, you know. And so we have partner classes with that program at Harborview. And Mr. Josh, he's a kindergarten teacher, Mr. Josh Jackson from Kake. He teaches one of the partner classes. He's a kindergarten teacher, so in the afternoon, 2 times a week, he goes and he uses what he knows and he teaches. And so anytime you take a language class, I always tell people, oh, you're going to be teaching soon. Soon you're going to be teaching at the middle school. Because we need the teachers, and it's how it happens. You know, you take something, and it's your responsibility to share what you know in order for our language to survive. At Gastineau, it's a school-wide model. And so at Gastineau, every single classroom, is there 11 or 12 classrooms? 12 classrooms, they all get 30 minutes of Tlingit language. It's amazing. There's kids running down the hall in Gastineau and yelling at each other in Tlingit. We don't want them yelling, but it's awesome. It just warms my heart. You walk into Gastineau and you see the language everywhere. The EOE is the Expanding on Excellence grant, and it serves about 300 kids within these 2 schools. At Harborview, it's easier to assess because I see them every day. It's easier to expect more of them. And when we first decided, okay, level 1, we want the kids to know 100 words, I went to Miss Christina's classroom and I said, you need to know 100 words. Let's list and see if we know 100 words as a class. And one of the young men who's performing right now next door stood up and he goes, Kake, Dech, Nusk, Dakru, and he goes, you want me to keep going? And I was like, okay, let's have more than counting. So the kids are so proud of the language that they have. And it's just amazing that they're interacting in the language. So for assessments, I inserted for a 4th, 5th grade pre-assessment from the Harborview classroom. And it looks a little different because I was asking them not just to physically respond, I was asking them to tell me about themselves. And so the question was, Wase do a SOK? Well, you can see that 13 people responded with name, Yuchet do a SOK. And then one kid just said John or Billy, whatever their name was. And then One kid needed prompting, and then 2 kids had no clue. And so with these types of assessments, I was able to take this and say, okay, my 2 kids that don't know, one just moved in from Texas. One just moved from another school. This is why they don't know it, but we need to honor that they still don't know it and not just skip over the main basic parts. And I think that's one of the important tools of this assessments is that I've been able to step back from just going in a classroom now and just tasaya, da 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 dasaya, gusua e, besides just going off, I have a map. And I know these kids have to know these sentences in order for them to get the little check, and in order for the checks to raise our achievements, our scores, and in order to get that federal granting, in order to teach them about their culture. It's a lot of loopholes that we go through, but we do it for our kids. So the federal government needs to know this information for the grants. And my big thing is, how do we assess this social change? And how do we assess this cultural knowledge and this cultural feeling that's growing within our kids? And so one of the ways that I've just personally been able to assess it and see this positive change within the Juneau School District is that our native and non-native students are interacting in Tlingit. And even if it is just ahadi or kakashat or kucheta, it's still one word, and it's that one word that's going to grow to 2. That's going to grow, and it's going to go home, and the kids are going to use it at home. So the children, they're speaking Tlingit in the school hallways, gyms, classroom, and playgrounds. And I see this respect for traditional knowledge growing. And I see it at Castano. And at Harborview, we have our Tlingit children in the program. And the majority of the kids are Tlingit. I think there's 3 or 4 that are Hispanic, but they're all Tlingit. And at Castano, we have our Tlingit children with our non-native children. And they're interacting. And these non-native children are gaining a respect for this traditional knowledge. And it always brings me to tears, because they're being given this knowledge of my ancestors, and I'm able to facilitate that with Jennifer and with Alice and with Nancy. And I'm able to facilitate that with them and give them something that I was not given, that my brother was not given, that many of us were not given in the schools. And it's just this awesome change that's happening. And I have so much respect for the ladies who have gone before me. I mean, Miss Nancy was our Indian Studies teacher, and it was the best week of my life that she was in my classroom, that one week. And the positive change can be seen with the teachers. At Harborview, we did a preliminary just question about if we could do a school-wide model here at Harborview, who would want Tlingit language in their classroom? And it's the teachers outside of the program, and all the teachers wanted it. They all saw this positive change in students for learning culture and learning the language of this land that we live on. And at Gastineau, there's a teacher, Mr. Craigmont, and he was in part of Read Across America, where they celebrate Dr. Seuss's birthday. And so we're at the Nugget Mall, and we're celebrating Dr. Seuss's birthday, and I read a book in Tlingit. There's small reading groups going on, and so then we're having birthday cake, and we sing happy birthday, and I was like, oh, I should have went up to Mr. K and said, Mr. K, let's sing it in Tlingit. I didn't even have to. He looked at me after we sang it in English, and he just started singing it in Tlingit all by himself. And I was like, yay! I was like, yay, I don't have to be here anymore. The change is happening, and with just all this work, and it's positive, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And I've been saying this all year, anytime I've been given a chance to use a microphone. It comes from Kingisti, our grandfather, Shangu Kediahe. He said, hakusti awe atu yeyeti hayukletangi. A culture lives in our language. And with the scope and sequence, you'll see it, go print it off, you'll see it, it's going to be a list. but it's our culture. And it's our culture being put into this academic setting to benefit our children. And it's tedious, it's hard, and even in the work that I'll give you, the curriculum and the handouts, there's gonna be smelling. It's all draft form. I'm still a learner. I started learning Tlingit in 2001, and I'm a learner. I'm learning to spell, and with the help of Selena Everson Kake, our grandma who works at Harborview, she's really helped me with pronunciation and tones, and there's many other elders, even in this room, Gunashish, that have helped me along this journey of learning our language. Our culture lives in our language, and our languages are now living in Harborview and Gastineau School, and it's exciting. Gunashish.
I want to let you know that I am the new person on the block. I just started and joined this group 2 years ago. But let me first introduce myself. Jennifer Scott, Chwachk, Yuchatuasauk, Yechna Chatsati, Kachari Ayachat, Zakwedi Yadi Ayachat, Ki Kwan Ayachat. And of course, I do work at the Juneau School District, and I do want to thank these ladies for putting up with me because, I did hear the language spoken all over the village of Kake as I was growing up. My grandparents always spoke the language and always came into our home and spoke the language, but they never ever did teach me. And to work through in writing this scope and sequence has opened my eyes to many things, and of course, some stupid questions these ladies have had to put up with throughout this whole time that I have worked with them. And I do want to thank them for all their hard work, because like they say, we did work together at 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning. Well, it was 8:30. But I do know that I wasn't a big contributor to this, but I was there to help them and stand with them.
So it's always the first one.
But I also am thankful that the Juneau School District has embraced the Tlingit language and has welcomed it into the schools. I'm very thankful for that, because without that invitation, we definitely wouldn't be standing here right now. I want to let you know, first and foremost, that Gastineau is not an all-native school. We do have plenty of non-native children that Ms. Chester has spoken about. They are the ones that do stand up there, and they're very proud to stand and share with you exactly what Tlingit word that they have learned that week. And it's those kids that do warm your heart, like Ms. Chester says. They, I feel, have embraced our culture and our language, and that can do no harm. And I know that it is building bridges, and these are the bridges that we do want to build between the native and the non-native, and that respect that will grow in their knowledge about our culture. Is that relationship that we do need to build so that we can reach out to each other and get to know one another. And of course, that's how the respect is built. In the beginning, of course, Ms. Angie Lunda was the principal who did invite the TCLL grant to be welcomed into Gastineau. It hadn't been there before 2 years ago. It was by her request that the grant was invited to enter. And not only is Ms. Chester the Tlingit language person, but we also have David Katzeek, who comes in and shares in Tlingit songs, dance, and stories. And of course, it is he that shares about and shares to all the students how very special they are and how very unique they are. And the first thing he begins his whole gathering with the students, he asks, has anyone told you how special you are? Raise your hand today. Has anyone told you how special you are? Anybody? One person. And of course, he goes on to share with the whole group exactly how very special they are. And he claims this is what he had learned it from his grandparents, that, you know, I am so special that I can stand up here and tell you about who I am and tell you about my grandparents and about their language and about their culture. And to me, I think that's very powerful. Of course, we're very thankful and very pleased to have Miss Chester, who comes into our building on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and also to have Ms. Davis, who is a helper with Ms. Chester this year, in teaching the Tlingit language to all of the students K-5. And as she told you earlier, we did begin the language by just offering, you know, just the Tlingit alphabet. And you probably could go to the See Alaska website and find that on there and download it and print it and put it in all of the classrooms. I think that is one of the places that we did start, so that it's a very delicate thing to go into a non-native area and try to bring in your culture and your language to people who have never been a part of the Tlingit culture. But we're very thankful that the teachers over there have embraced the Tlingit language and culture, and inviting Ms. Chester and Ms. Davis and Mr. Katzeek and myself to come into their classrooms and share our knowledge. Let me tell you, as Ms. Chester said, you know, the students, they walk around and they do speak Tlingit, and there are not just the native students, they're speaking out in Tlingit. The teachers have embraced the language so well, you know, once a week we have even offered the Tlingit language to the teachers during their lunchtime. And, you know, they're so dedicated. They take time out of their lunch. Instead of preparing for their next classroom, they come down. Myself and Ms. Davis usually do prepare a lunch for them. And they sit around the table and learn from David Katzeek or Ms. Folletti, or John Palms came and shared a couple classes as well. And, you know, they're so dedicated, they come in and try to learn the language. And we're so pleased with the efforts they have put forward. And so much so that I didn't know that they even sang that happy birthday in Tlingit. I'm very pleased to hear. And not only that, you know, we did do a survey with the teachers, and they felt, you know, this would be like a magic bullet for the dropout. They felt it was something that would help the dropout rate. But not only that, you know, I carried around this letter for a whole year. It was written by a teacher, and I asked the teachers to write me a reason why they would want to make this drum, that we were offering this drum making class. And he wrote on there about a student. She was normally very shy, but, you know, when David Katzeek came into the classroom, that girl, you know, she all of a sudden started sitting up taller and taller as David went on speaking and telling his story and song. And by the time he left, you know, she was standing there and even talking out. And David has many stories about students who do that exact same behavior. You know, they are very quiet and withdrawn at the very beginning, but, you know, as David has been coming into the classroom and as Ms. Chester has been sharing the language, the Tlingit children have moved forward, closer to the front, and very happy and pleased to see, you know, within the school district, a part of them is being reflected for the very first time. and of which I am very thankful and pleased to see and be a part of, and I would not have missed it for the world, believe me. The school, like Ms. Chester has said, we have put out Tlingit words all over the school. You know, you go in the bathroom, you see some Tlingit words there staring back at you. And what have I learned? I've learned for myself, you know, I learned a lot about who I am. And I'm very pleased to learn about my grandparents and the folks who have gone before me. And I'm very glad that they took the time and worked very hard for me to get where I am today. Without them, I would not be standing here. And also very pleased because I know building bridges between the Native and non-Native community is very important. If we just teach only to our own, of course we're only building the bridge halfway, but if we teach the non-Native population about our culture and our language, we build a bridge that will be available not only for my children or my grandchildren, which I am told is going to come sometime soon, but your grandchildren as well. But I do, and I am thankful for this program, and I'm thankful that you're here.
So with that, we'd like to open it up for some questions and answers. I'd like to acknowledge Dick Downhauer's in the room, and Nora was here a little while ago also for their very strong role in helping to build the scope and sequence and create some of the assessments that we talked about. To say that Jessica's point about pushing it into the academic program has been really, really important. For everybody in Southeast, you know that Juneau is the biggest school district and at times is absolutely the most difficult school district in all of Southeast Alaska. And 9 years ago when we started this whole effort in collaboration with Alaska, there were lots of people shaking their heads saying this is never going to work in Juneau because there's so many issues in Juneau. And so to the enduring credit to people like Kitty Eddy and Nancy Douglas and Jessica Chester and Jennifer Scott and all the others, Hans Chester down there, who have been working tirelessly for those 9 years to keep it growing. My job throughout these grants has been the external evaluator, and I'll say that I had the pleasure the week before last of interviewing 12 students who are now freshmen at Juneau Douglas High School who started out the program as first graders in Miss Kitty's class. So they went through Harborview, they went through Zuntakahini, and they're now freshmen in the high school. They're all in school. That was really important. They're all engaged. They all have ideas about what they want to do with their future. They all had very specific memories of being in elementary school that had to do with events in Miss Gen's class or Miss Kitty's class or Miss Maisato's class. They were very clear that the program and what they learned was really important to them. And just as the quotes I used in the beginning of this session with the younger students about why language and culture are a very vital part of the district and their education, the high school freshmen had the same things to say. And when I asked him the question, well, who are your best friends? Of the 12 kids, every single one of them named at least one of the others of that little core group who they started out with in primary class. That there's been this enduring bonding with them, and so their pride in language, culture, and each other has taken them on into high school. And what the district is watching is how it will take them through high school and onto stage for graduation. This program has been an interesting commitment on the part of the school district to say, rather than dealing with lots of intervention programs at the secondary level, let's see what happens if we start from the very beginning and take one group and follow them all the way through and see if we can really hang on to those kids all the way through the system when we know we have a big dropout rate at the secondary level with Alaskan Native students. And so far with these freshmen, I would say that there's some pretty good testimony that Barbara Cadiente Nelson and I just gave to the Juneau School Board 3 weeks ago to say, this is making a significant difference in the lives of these students, their academic success, and their families. So if you're interested in any of the evaluation data from 9 years, we have lots and lots of it, and have been tracking longitudinal data from the students, from their teachers, from their parents, from their principals. We have, and so there's federal government reports, there's Juneau School District reports. So if that would help any of you in your schools or your districts, let me know. I'm happy to share that with you. And we would love to welcome any questions from you.
Hi, I'm Shirley Kendall. Do we sign up for the offer, or what? How do we get the assessment that you were talking about?
So the question from Shirley Kendall is, how do we get the assessments? How do we sign up for that offer? Jessica and Nancy did burn some CDs for those of you who are interested in getting a copy. So I think she'd be happy to hand them out. So you're welcome to take one with you.
Go ahead and download that file from the website, and it'll be up for a few months anyway.
It's a constant process of revising and adding to and correcting. Other questions? Another question out there? Yes?
What's happening with the ninth graders now that they're in ninth grade? Is there going to be anything offered for them in high school for that group?
Tlingit Language, Jessica also teaches a class every morning at the high school. She's a very busy woman. She starts at the high school, and she goes to Harborview, and then 3 times a week she goes to Gastineau as well. That class will definitely continue. There's been more and more interest at the high school level. There have been, the last 2 school board meetings, there's been testimonials from parents and urging the school board to not only consider federal grants, but to build it into the own budget process at the district level so that language could be offered consistently throughout kindergarten through 12th grade. The district's having lots of budget discussions right now. We'll see how all that comes out, but at least there's one class offered at the high school.
Thunder Mountain.
Oh, and Thunder Mountain as well, I'm sorry. And Ralph Wolf, who's a PETA student, who's the man in the white shirt sitting back there against the wall, he's teaching Tlingit at one of the middle schools, and so there's more and more interest. I think Dick could echo what I say, that years ago, maybe 10, 11 years ago, we started trying to offer family Tlingit through community schools. We could not generate enough interest. We were surveying students at the high school at that point. We couldn't get enough kids to sign up for one section of Tlingit class. And now, a decade later, we've got lots of kids. Of the 12 students that I interviewed, the freshmen, none of them has been able to take Tlingit in the high school this year because the classes are full, because the kids who are older than them get first dibs, and so 10 of the 12 said, I really want to take it next year, I hope, when I'm a sophomore. So, it's taken a while to build the interest, but the pressure keeps coming forward now to the administration, which is good.
I'm from Kake, and I'm on the school board, and we brought 3 of our school board with us, and we brought a teacher. And we have a Tlingit teacher, but what I've learned here, and I'm wondering if you have thought of going into the communities, the villages. Is there anything that would, that you could let come in and share? I mean, we can go back and do this, but sometimes having someone come in and gathering the people so that they can see the importance of the language. And I'm thinking this isn't just a school that coming here and learning this. This is a community-wide thing. And so I'm wondering if there is anything that you have in this.
I would say absolutely, and I think that there are people who would be more than willing to come to Kake and gather community and school people together. I know that Kitty and Nancy have both already been to the Yukon twice at their invitation because they're trying to begin doing an immersion, cultural immersion, language immersion program in at least one of the schools in the Yukon. I know Hans has been to Yakutat several times talking to people about mathematics in a cultural context, but also their language program. And I think it's through sharing all the resources across the region that we're going to certainly have a much broader impact. There are several really good PowerPoints that have been developed to use with the community about, the experience that we've had in Juneau, but to try to, sort of figure out, well, so what can we do to help you in Kake, or what can we learn from what you're doing in Kake, so it builds bigger. I also know that we continue to talk with everybody at Sea Alaska to say, as the regional entity, we want more professional development for teachers across the region, that they would help facilitate that through funding or through other kinds of grants, and that language get built into everything that's going on with anything that they're doing in the region. So if you have more ideas, we would be happy to, and there are great ambassadors to come to Kake anytime you want.
I have a comment. Kake has one of the best language teachers in the country.
Yeah.
There, many of us have learned from Ruth, and you have a wonderful, wonderful resource. She's come to many of our workshops. I work at Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, and I am always saying we need more language workshops. We need more language workshops. But all of our workshops have been funded through some kind of a federal or state grant, and we're really running dry. So people have noticed that we haven't had very many workshops lately. But it isn't just one school, it's a whole community of learners throughout Southeast Alaska and Canada. And as a community of learners, we all learn from each other, and we have to support each other. And it's this resource that we have is different than the resources you have in your communities where you have fluent speakers. And so when we work together and become a community of learners, then the paperwork part and the academic part work together with the fluent speakers, and we get a really dynamic, strong program. But everybody thinks, oh, somebody else has the answer, and if we come in from 50 miles away with a briefcase, then somehow we're right, when the people in your community may have been saying the same things all along.
I'd also like to just take a minute to thank the people of Klukwan as well, because part of the project that we've worked on here in Juneau has been a camp for the last 2 summers for teachers. So teachers from Juneau, from Harborview and Gastineau schools have gone up for 3 or 4 days of a subsistence culture and language camp that's been hosted in Klukwan, and has been an amazing learning experience, particularly for the non-native teachers. It's been quite, the testimonials and the way they've taken what they've learned in just that short period of time and applied it to their attitude, so that teacher, who is the last person who you would expect to be standing up in the Nugget Mall in Juneau singing Happy Birthday in Tlingit, he's the last person I ever would have picked, just does it naturally, has been because of some of these experiences. So it has been quite profound, and we hope that it will spread in this community, and that whatever we can do to help anybody else, again, we're happy to.
I'd like to compliment the panel, especially the panel in the front. I knew Nancy since she was a little girl. I worked with a Sitka Native education program for 20 years. I know she was one of the fine examples for my father, Charlie Joseph. And I wish we had a panel that helped us as teachers as we began. We were really beginners to begin with with the language, going in without direction. And to have planners, and I know Jessica back there, and I know her emotional being as she was standing there, emotional, because to hear our Tlingit language, and as a speaker, and growing up in that, to have the young people to keep this in front of them makes me feel very, very good. And I thank you for your learning. I know that some of the speakers feel the same way here.
On the discs that I just handed out, there was two. There was one with just curriculum, and it's basically that list with the different methods listed underneath, saying use this method or teach this group of words together. And then there was another CD with songs. If you didn't get both of those CDs, you can come up and I will gladly send you one. Just let me know where to send it to. So, the one thing that as a language teacher I know is really important and takes a lot of time is finding the pictures. And so on the CD, I copied all my picture files that I've been using on there. So hopefully they'll just click it and open up naturally.
And another thing, there are a lot of language resources on the Sealaska Heritage website, and sometimes people call and say, can we use those? And we encourage people to download them and use them however you want in your instruction.
So thank you all again, and enjoy the next session. Thanks.